Awesome. Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. We're just waiting for a minute or so for people to arrive, so just sit tight. Lots of people coming in. Awesome. Okay, because we have a limited time, I might just kick things off. So, tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome everyone to our Aotearoa New Zealand Lunch and Learn series in partnership with Tu'o Aotearoa Volunteering New Zealand. My name is Kelsey, and with this series, we intend to support you with all the amazing mahi that you do by inviting along thought leaders in the volunteering space to have insightful kōrero over your lunch break. I am super excited today to be joined by Libby McGee. Libby is an experienced workforce management specialist with a strong background in large-scale, people-focused operations at major sporting events like the FIFA Women's World Cup 2023, Asian Football Cup 2023, ICC Men's Cricket World Cup 2019, and the 2018 Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. Welcome, Libby. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Kelsey. Very excited to be here.
Awesome. Now, just quickly before we kick things off, for those of you who aren't aware of Rosterfy, we've been around for 8 years now, and we're used by over 3 million volunteers and staff globally. We've recently ticked over 100 million hours of volunteering powered by Rosterfy across 35 countries, and we're all about connecting communities to events and causes that they are passionate about. Here is just a quick sample of some of the customers we work with worldwide, supporting them with the volunteer experience end to end. And the fact that we're so configurable is our point of difference and makes us super effective at supporting our partners and cutting down on manual processes and spreadsheets so that they can focus on scaling and better connecting with their volunteers. Here are a few more of our partners, but in the sporting and event space, which obviously is very relevant to today's conversation. But because we're short on time, let's kick off the discussion. Quick bit of housekeeping. As always, there's a question box at the top right-hand side. So please just drop any questions in there for Libby, and we'll either answer as we go or wrap up at the end with a little bit of a Q&A. So Libby, let's start with, were there any key decisions or turning points in your career that helped you to land these international opportunities?
Yeah, I definitely think there were some key decision points. And I think the first one was the very first role that I took working on a volunteer program for a major event. So in 2016, I finished at uni and I studied a Bachelor of Physical Education, majoring in Sports and Leisure Studies, so essentially sports management.
Yep.
And at the end of that, I was like every graduate applying for every job I possibly could. And one that I had an interview with was the World Masters Games in 2017. And the role there was volunteer program assistant. I didn't know anything really about major events at that time. I had never even heard of the World Masters Games. But went to the interview, learned a lot, really enjoyed the people I spoke with. And, a couple of weeks later got offered the job, which was really exciting, but the role paid very, very low. And I had to move from Dunedin up to Auckland to take that job. So I thought about it for a long time. I was really unsure whether I should do it or not. In the end, I decided to take it. It was a 6-month gig. So I thought, surely I can survive on not much. I've been used to living like a student for 6 months and then, get another opportunity after that. But now looking back in hindsight, that was a really big moment for me because that opened my eyes to the world of major events, started building my network of people, understanding that there is a career in major event management, that you can travel the world, meet lots of people. So yeah, I think that key decision of taking a little bit of a risk and jumping into that, was certainly one of the turning points for me. Yeah.
Sensational foot in the door. Hey, sometimes only hindsight provides you with that sort of overlook as to exactly how far it can actually push your trajectory of your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Just little decision, but has made a big impact.
Big impact. And what advice would you give to someone who wants to work on global sporting events and volunteer roles?
I would say the biggest advice I can give is to be flexible and
Mhm.
say yes to those opportunities. The world of major events is that every event is quite different. So while you may have a role as a volunteer manager in one event, the next event it might not specifically have a volunteer program, or they might, be a little bit different. Every event is set up completely differently, run by different people,
Mhm.
have different people working for them. So I think being flexible is really important. For example, when I left the World Masters Games and I ended up getting a job at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games,
Mhm.
but there I was working in paid staff recruitment. So although it wasn't volunteer management, which I'd really enjoyed, it was kind of a sidestep into a similar area, but a little bit different there. And I
Mhm.
think that opportunity of saying yes to opportunities is really important as well. That first opportunity, getting the job at World Masters, but then saying yes to a job on the Gold Coast, saying yes to moving to London, moving to the other side of the world, saying yes to a job in Qatar. Taking those opportunities then lead to further opportunities as well. So, I think that's probably the best advice I can give is be a little bit flexible. For me, I was lucky. I was only 22 when I started this career, so jumping
Mhm.
around all over the world is a bit easier. I know it's a bit more challenging as you get older and you've got more commitments. But yeah, being young, be able to take that opportunity, being able to get visas in different countries can be a lot easier when you're younger too. So yeah,
Mhm.
saying yes and going for it while you can.
Absolutely. And you've touched on this now around, I suppose, moving across a lot of different countries and working on these really large events across these different locations. So, what are the biggest challenges that you've faced managing volunteers across different cultures or countries? Have you found it's all similar or quite a few differences?
Yeah, in a lot of the ways it's the same. Volunteers can be quite similar across the board, but there definitely is some differences. For me, I've worked in New Zealand, Australia, UK, and Qatar. But even you think New Zealand, Australia, and the UK are quite similar, but they actually have
Mhm.
their own differences too. Um, I think the biggest challenge that you face in any major event volunteer program is recruiting and getting enough volunteers or getting enough of the right volunteers. So
Yeah.
I think the difference across the different areas is understanding who your target market is for volunteers and
Hmm.
helping kind of developing the program right from the start around them. An example is when I worked in London for Euro 2020. I actually worked on the city volunteer program that was run by the Greater London Authority. And a key target of our program was to recruit 40% of Black, Asian, or minority ethnicity volunteers, because that
Yeah.
was how that population was represented in the city. So we wanted to represent that population in our volunteer program.
Super
Um,
important.
and so great that that's a target, but how are we actually going to reach these volunteers? So
Hmm.
it was a lots of actually speaking to people from those backgrounds, understanding what were barriers and challenges to volunteering for them, and then tailoring our program to suit. Um, right from the beginning of, how are we communicating with them? Most of some feedback we got was that people don't read the emails that are really long and have all the information in it. So how can we shorten emails? How can we use text messages instead? Developing our program each step of the way to meet our target market. I guess on the other side, in New Zealand, we don't traditionally have a lot of major event volunteers as such,
Yeah.
because we don't have as many events here. So people, aren't ready and willing to do it. So for the FIFA Women's World Cup, we had to look a bit wider, particularly outside of Auckland, of how to get people involved in the volunteer roles. And a key thing we learned is that we needed more volunteers than there was just for, um, we couldn't just look at retired and students.
Yeah.
So we needed to look at working age people. And for that, if we ask working age people to come to a shift that's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, then that's just not going to work. So it was really
Yeah.
understanding those people and trying to tailor our program to suit them, to allow them those opportunities to volunteer. Yeah. So I think, across the board, every volunteer has different priorities, and some of those can be related to the country that they're in, and how we manage them.
Yeah, I think that's just an important understanding your volunteers, one of the most important things across, whether you're a non-for-profit organisation or whether you are looking in events and sporting. Understanding your volunteers is huge, but especially when you're working in a bit more of a dynamic industry where you might be jumping around these large events and you've got a shortest time frame to really understand them well, and you don't sort of have those year-on-year learnings maybe. Really insightful.
Yeah, exactly. I think taking time right at the beginning to learn about who your target volunteers are can really help in the long run as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you build your professional network in the international sports industry? Because it sounds like often these events have actually contacted you, haven't they, as well, not just you going out to them?
Correct. Yeah. I'm sure everyone's probably heard it before, but in major events, it's all about who you know. With events, it's actually really easy to build a network because you work with so many people so closely. Workforces for these events can be anywhere, I don't know, from maybe 50 for a smaller scale event through to a couple of thousand people working on something like a Com Games. So there's really, really massive networks. And in a role like volunteer management, you're working with all sorts of departments or functional areas. So you're having lots of really close relationships. So that's really important. And the other side of it is that when you are applying for jobs with major events, generally every job receives a huge number of applications. So if you already know someone who you can speak to and say, hey, keep a lookout for my application, I've applied, that can go a long way too. So it's, like I said, easy to make those connections, but what I think is really important is to make sure they're positive relationships, because you are very likely to be able to be working with them again sometime in the future. And for me, how I always approach it is to make sure that whatever problem or whatever conflict you might have with another staff member that you're trying to work through, to be really solution oriented. So try and think of how you can come to a compromise that works for both of you. Often in volunteer management, my role is to really advocate for the volunteer and make sure that we're doing everything that looks after them and make sure they're having a good experience. But for other departments, they are really looking at the volunteer as a resource, which of course they are as well. So it's working together to make sure that we each understand what we're trying to achieve and coming up with a solution, rather than just being really, really stuck in your ways and not being flexible. And I think that's helped a lot.
Especially in those shorter term contracts, right, where you don't have as much time to build that connection over time, like building it quite quickly and getting an understanding really, really early on is super important. A little birdie also told me, I am going to mention this, that the Asian Football Cup in Qatar contacted you for your role as a workforce systems manager because you had prior experience with Rosterfy. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's why they initially reached out. I have had the pleasure of working with Rosterfy right from that first job I had at World Masters Games in 2017, where a very early version of the software. I think, again, being quite young at the time, it was easy to kind of anything technology related was pushed to me and kind of happened throughout the roles. But through it, I really learned how to use Rosterfy to its full capacity. And that has certainly been helpful for future roles, because Rosterfy is super easy to use, but if you have someone who really knows how to get the most out of it, using automations to reduce admin, can go a long way in a volunteer program. So I think, it was a nice sell. I had people knew that I'd used it a lot, but again, networks, connections that knew that I was a little bit of an expert on Rosterfy, and landed me a role in Qatar, which I never thought I would end up working there. But 3 months as the workforce systems manager was a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, we're also finding that a lot more of our admins across Rosterfy are making sure that this is really well known on their LinkedIn, because we've found that I think the UEFA in Switzerland and FIFA in Miami were actually scouring the world for people that had Rosterfy
Mm.
experience. Because once they chose that system that they were going to go with, they were like, right, short term, we need someone that's already up to speed and can just dive right in. So just on that note, I'm going to pop in to the chat for any admins on here that have used Rosterfy before. Um, Please join our community group on LinkedIn as well. It's just a great way to stay in touch about what roles and things might be available too. I'll drop it in here, our community group. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, that's come through. Awesome. Perfect. So, do you think that volunteering is a viable pathway into a long-term career in sports management and operations?
I definitely do.
Mhm.
For me, it probably wasn't the main thing that led into my career, but I think it definitely helped. When I was at uni, I was looking for any and every opportunity to volunteer for sports events, to get some really good experience. I think there are two key ways that how I've seen people transition from volunteers into working on major events in
Mhm.
any area, whether it's sport, operations, transport, logistics, anything at all.
Yeah.
The first one is volunteering with major events when you can, and I think it's really important to commit more than just turning up and doing the bare minimum of your job. The
Yeah.
volunteers that really stand out are the ones that go above and beyond. They're there to try and improve the event or whatever that they're working on. They come up with ideas. They're a bit creative. They can provide you with constructive feedback, and are really willing to be there. They also are often the ones who contact me in advance and say, I'm looking for some opportunities. Do you need some help in the office? And major event professionals will all tell you that you're always insanely busy and you've got a million and one things to do. And a
Mhm.
lot of those tasks are things that you could get volunteer support with. So even if volunteer roles aren't advertised as being, office based or pre-event, then I would always reach out and ask for those opportunities.
Mhm.
And the second side that's not major events, like I mentioned before, New Zealand doesn't get a massive amount of these. So
Yeah.
there's something that actually relates to my current role with Athletics New Zealand. We host 24 national championship events every single year. So we run a lot of events, and almost all of those events are run by local organising committees. So a group of volunteers, normally based around an athletics club, that pull together. We work very closely with them to deliver these events.
Mhm.
And those kind of roles, you get so much experience, you get a lot of responsibility for a volunteer role to be running an event, and that kind of experience is really key and something that if I was looking at a job application and saw that someone had worked on those type of committees, that would be a big asset as well.
Amazing. Have you found any strategies particularly effective for keeping your volunteers motivated and engaged during long tournaments? We all know about the classic sort of drop off rate. There's the day one, everyone shows up. Day 4 or 5, you're looking at volunteer numbers dwindling.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a problem, not a problem, but it's a challenge with every major event, particularly those longer ones. If you think about World Cups, they generally go for 4 to 6 weeks, something along those lines. So you're expecting a long-term commitment from volunteers.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, an easy one is that you always have some kind of reward and recognition program. But again, I think what's really important with those programs is to understand who your volunteers are and what they see as a reward. Um, some people love the gifts, and that does keep them inspired to come back more and more, whether it's a little badge that they're getting or
mm,
a mug or something. Whereas other volunteers don't respond to that at all, and they got enough things. They don't need any more things. So how can you recognize them? So I like to try and be as creative as possible. Ask people what they want. Is it hosting a little volunteer get together midway through the event that's outside of the venue, so that they can socialize and maybe they really value the community aspect of what they're doing? Um, and understanding their priorities and what they want to achieve. The other thing that I think is super simple to do, but goes a massive way, is listening to feedback from your volunteers. If on your first day or first few days they come back and they're saying, I didn't have a great experience here, or this could be done a little bit better, is actually taking that feedback and trying to action it as soon as you can. So if you're seeing as you're actioning it, they're going to improve their experience and hopefully continue throughout. Whereas if you ignore that and think, oh, well, we've only got a few weeks left, but then you're probably going to have those volunteers be less likely to show up for their future shifts. And the final one that I think is also super easy to do is just being friendly and enthusiastic. You might be really struggling, long hours, it's been a busy tournament, but just showing up every morning, being smiley face when you check them in, it goes a massive way to make them feel welcome and enjoy their time there.
Absolutely. And how do you approach conflict resolution when dealing with diverse volunteer teams?
This one can be challenged, and I think it comes in any kind of volunteer management, whether it's major events or something more local. An example that I have for this one is another role that I do is I'm volunteer manager of the Auckland FC volunteer program. So new football team this year, and we set up a volunteer program to welcome all the spectators and run our fan zone and things like that, which is really exciting, very successful program. But we did have a couple of instances where there were conflicts between volunteers, and that can be challenging to deal with. For me, I think it's really important to be as fair as you possibly can. You might have, as the world of volunteering and sports events, it's very small, and you might have pre-existing relationships with volunteers, so you're naturally drawn to favour them and understand their side of the story. But it's really important to hear both sides and understand what's really happened. I think that's a big part of conflict resolution. The other one is trying again to come up with a solution rather than just saying, okay, one of these volunteers has to leave the program. How can we actually continue to allow them to work together? They might not get along with each other, and so we don't want them in the same team, but can we separate them to other areas? Can we give them different shifts so that they're not on together? And then the final thing I think I would look at here is making sure that you have a really strong policy or a volunteer agreement that you can fall back on if there is an issue that you can't resolve. And when you're setting up a volunteer program and you might be sending out roll offers and then you're getting volunteers to accept their offer and agree to terms and conditions or an agreement or whatever it may be, it's really easy at that point in time when you haven't had to deal with any conflict to just rush through it and not put a lot of thought into it and just chat GPT something to go on a piece of paper. But in reality, put the effort in at the beginning and understand what potential situations that might come up. Then you have that documentation and that policy to come back to if you do get to an issue that's particularly difficult to deal with. And it's probably a learning that I took from the experience with Auckland FC this year, is that something we can review for the next season to make sure that we've got really strong policy in place. Not that it happens often, but you have to be prepared for those times when it does happen.
Unfortunately, no matter how great your program is, there's always lots of different dynamics going on and lots of different moving parts. You can't control that. So you're right, having a really clear policy and I suppose not just rushing through it, really giving thought to how you manage it also then has ripple effect as well if someone feels respected on both ways of that conflict. And we're coming into a couple of questions, so if anyone has any questions for the Q&A, please drop them in the chat and we can run through them as well. We've got a few minutes left of Libby's time, so please make the most of it. So looking back, what do you wish you had known when you were just starting out in volunteer or sport event management? Big question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the one I've had to think about the most. I think a couple of things. One is that if I had known the community that I would have built, that I have built since, it would have been so much an easier decision right at the beginning to jump into it. Um, the friends that I now have who started as colleagues from all around the world has got to be one of the biggest selling points of this career path of
Yeah.
just meeting people from all over the place and getting to know them. You're often in a situation with major events where there's many others who aren't from that country or city who are all kind of thrown in the deep end together. So it's a really, really great way to build those friendships. And secondly, I think to know or remember that every event you're going to feel overwhelmed at the start. You're pretty much always going to be thrown in the deep end. It's going to be a lot of information in the first few weeks, but generally within a month you have everything under control, and then by the end of it you are 100% the expert in that area of the event. So and still now, when I start a new role, I have to remember that. Like, it's okay. I know it's a lot now. It's a bit overwhelming, but it will get there. And yeah, you'll be really strong at the end of it. So yeah, I think those are the key things that I think I wish I'd known right back at the start.
I think it's like anything, isn't it? When you're at the bottom of like a huge mountain of like what you have to achieve and complete, it feels just enormously intimidating. And a lot of imposter syndrome can pop in there as well. But you're right, it's just about one foot in front of the other. And then, I mean, look at all you've achieved as well. So if you're still feeling that way when you come to your next big event, it just shows that it's a very real experience for everybody.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that was all of our questions for Libby. I will keep an eye on the Q&A in case we have any come through, but I think, Libby, you've been so comprehensive in your answers and you've covered so much today, and it's been such a pleasure to have you with us to chat. We've had a couple of other, I think this is our 5th Lunch and Learn webinar we've done now, and you're the first sort of in this major event space, which is quite unique, and also being such a Rosterfy expert as well, and having worked with our platform for so long, it's a real honor to have you here to get your feedback and your insight into what it means to build a career. What I've got on the screen for everyone who's on the call is I have a QR code that you can scan to learn a little bit more about Rosterfy. We do have this offer at a 30-minute sort of health check for your program and strategy session with one of our experts at Rosterfy. Should you wish to jump on and just learn a little bit about what we do and how we might be able to support as well. Here's also my contact details. You've probably all received an email from me though, inviting you to this webinar. So I'm sure you have it, but if not, that's me there on the screen. But otherwise, we're right on time here. So mā te wā, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch break with us. And we hope to see you again on our next session. And thank you again so much to Libby for joining. Your insights were just incredible today, and can't wait to see what the rest of your career looks like. It's already so impressive. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kelsey. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.